Good afternoon and good morning, everyone. Here with Coalition to talk about multi-factor authentication and make everyone familiar with both the benefits of this security practice as well as the specifics of the Coalition endorsement and get into details of how to enable. I'm going to get started in one more minute, but appreciate those of you who are ready to go on time, whether it's afternoon or morning for you. All right, let's get started. We are recording this, so if we need to share with colleagues, happy to do so. And we'll make time for questions throughout. I have a few colleagues who are joining me and will be able to pay attention and flag me if I'm leading us astray or otherwise want to get into details. All right, so everyone here knows we're Coalition. Our mission is to solve cyber risk, and the way we're approaching that is through cyber insurance. We now offer up to $15 million in limit in the United States, and we combine insurance with the proactive security platform. And we're always looking for ways to connect the dots and say, this is something that will improve security, improve resilience for businesses. Currently focused on the small and medium business segment, but you'll certainly hear very shortly that we're going up to companies up to $1 billion in revenue in the United States this month, which we're very excited about, having proven the approach thanks to our broker partners and our policyholders to take it further. My name is John Roberts. I'm the head of product. I skipped over that little detail from the previous slide, but I'm come to this entire approach from the network security world. And I'm been learning about insurance over the last 3 years, and I love the aligned incentives that insurance brings. And that's really what this multi-factor authentication retention reduction is about. It's taking things we have learned from our experience helping customers and putting an incentive in place. And it's entirely a benefit. So the agenda you see in front of you is like, let's understand what the hell this is. What is this coverage enhancement? And then I'm going to wrap up by getting detailed about how and why you should enable multi-factor authentication on your own business email systems. We have many broker partners who are also policyholders. There may be prospective broker partners or policyholders on this call, and I welcome you because this is a message that we want to share with everyone. You can see the topics. I'm going to what is this 3-letter acronym that we're looking at? How does it impact your use of services, especially your email? What is the problem? How does MFA fix the problem? And then we'll dive a little bit in the details of the endorsement and get tactical about how to enable it. So first, it wouldn't be technology or perhaps insurance without a 3-letter acronym. And MFA stands for multi-factor authentication. I want to be direct and say that you may have heard of 2-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication is the broader term because in some situations, there's 2, 3, 4, or even more factors or different pieces that you bring to identifying yourself securely and accurately to a system. So we're using multi-factor authentication. If you have 2-factor authentication in place, then you qualify for all the benefits of this great security practice, as well as the endorsement and reducing that retention dramatically. Core piece is we all have a username or an email address and a password for most systems. Importantly, multi-factor authentication adds another factor, another thing that you have in your possession, and that might be a physical token, More often and more commonly for a digital service, it is a one-time code that is updated over time and usually in a mobile application, or sometimes text messaging. And we'll get into that in some details. What I want to show you for those who may not have multi-factor authentication, and thank you all who shared, what services you're using now, and whether you have multi-factor authentication enabled, it's what is the experience like as a user. So I'm going to show you, I have screenshots from my own sign-in. At Coalition, we currently use Google's email service, and we have multi-factor authentication turned on. They call it secondary verification, but it's first email, second password, and then at that point, I'm challenged for a one-time code, and it's a one-time code that updates in an application on my mobile phone, iOS, Android, even BlackBerry supported, and there's multiple different applications that you can use that are all free. And I want to reinforce that this is both easy and free in almost all situations to turn on for email, because all of these providers understand the value, and I'll get into more detail. But enter a code, and then for convenience, you'll see this little checkbox, don't ask again on this computer. And that definitely, if you're on a trusted device, you can sort of delay being asked every time. Without that checked, you are asked every time. So this is an additional step, and that additional step, this additional security token, provides tremendous security. And that's really why we're at it. As I mentioned, there's different applications. I personally use Authy. Google Authenticator is also on my phone for different reasons. Microsoft has a great free application across all these. There's also, and I'm not going to get into this, YubiKeys and Titan devices from Google, all of which are sort of a second factor that qualify. We'll talk a little more about it, but I do want to underline that having text messaging as a second factor, where you're sent a code when you log in, and then you enter that code in, so it doesn't come from your mobile application or a hardware token, but from SMS or a text message, it's very effective, and it absolutely qualifies for this retention reduction. It is slightly less secure than apps, but very effective and better than nothing. So we always encourage MFA. I've underlined that it's free, and I don't ever want to stop underlining that we're not asking anyone to do anything that doesn't make sense. It's a straightforward step, and we don't want money to be the reason why people don't take security steps. So I'll underline that. Just to help underline why this matters, and it's a message that we want you to share with prospective clients, with your colleagues as you're making this decision, is this is a problem. Without it, we have seen in the information we provide that employee information, credentials are lost all the time, or more accurately, they're stolen. And that's through no fault of the organization, the employees. It is a sign and a constant reminder that people are looking to compromise accounts, and they are looking in an automated way. This is not that someone is targeting Coalition or targeting any of your organizations necessarily, but people are looking and going to say, I have a hammer. If I find a nail on the internet, and there's millions of places to look for it, I'm going to use that hammer and swing it as hard as I can, usually for criminal gain. There are other factors, but most of us are targets of opportunity. And what we know, this is the widely researched Verizon report that comes out every year. Their just most recent one from several weeks ago, 60% of email breaches are just from stolen credentials. So you can't stop someone logging in as you with your information, with your credentials, unless you have multi-factor authentication turned on. And I want to underline, why did we decide, of all the different problems to be solved, and cybersecurity and cyber risk more directly has many different vectors and many different reasons, was we are Cyber 911 for our policyholders. We help them before, during, and after claims. And we have seen, I'm going to show you some specific numbers, that business email compromise through the lack of multi-factor authentication leads to claims, leads to things going wrong, leads to losses. And we all want to avoid the disruption and panic and the bad days that happen when something goes wrong. So in our small business segment, small and medium business, I should say, 36% of our claims originate from business email compromise. And as we go through these different items, in almost all cases, having multi-factor authentication in place would have prevented a claim and a loss and a bad day or a bad week. And while we're very good at helping quickly and expertly, we understand that that's not something anyone wants to go through. And then when it comes to dollars and cents, the average claim for SMBs, these are coalition numbers, from business email compromise is around $160,000. So not fun, something that obviously we've covered and we've paid a lot of claims and continue to do so. But how can we help avoid a claim for all the reasons where our incentives are aligned? So I've mentioned that those claims and incidents would have been avoided with multi-factor. I've got a few good stats from the biggest folks in the business that underline that. First of all, Microsoft, 99.9%. This is multi-factor in place, blocks automated attacks. And again, that target of opportunity. So if someone has stolen credentials and you can't put that toothpaste back in the tube and tries to use those in a credential stuffing attack, multi-factor authentication will stop them. Google took it a step further and says 100% of automated bots, and the difference between a bot and a cyber attack is minimal in this case. But the key point is this simple practice really makes a difference. And that's why we said, how can we make it easier? How can we provide an incentive? How can we put our money where our mouth is and advise and help and encourage our policyholders, our broker partners, and frankly, the internet wide to take action. That's why insurance is a great incentive mechanism here, because this is actually, sort of unfortunate reality is that, less than a third of people actually currently protect their accounts with multi-factor. And as I asked those of you who are joining us today, hey, do you use this? About 25% of you said yes, and about half said don't know, which is an interesting answer, and I want to get into that. But it sort of reinforces that we can all continuously improve, and this is a great step. So I'm going to pivot for a moment and get to specifically the endorsement. So this is the headline, and this is something that, if your policyholders, your prospective clients know about it, that's wonderful because it gives them incentive to take action. I'm going to talk a little bit about how this is available on all of our surplus lines quotes since September 9th. And on October 1st, we're going to activate this automatically for all of our surplus lines policies. But just because it's there won't help if policyholders don't know about it. And so, enlisting your help in making sure the word gets out. Here's more of the details on the endorsement. And this is in the specimen policies for every surplus lines quote. If you need a specimen of this endorsement, please follow up, help@coalitioninc.com. We're always happy to provide that. But the core point, if policyholder experiences business email compromise, but has multi-factor authentication enabled and required, they save 50% on the applicable self-insured retention, up to a maximum of $10,000. So the endorsement, which you'll see in your testimonials, is called the Multifactor Authentication, or MFA Retention Reduction. That is a mouthful, but we wanted to be really clear about the benefits. So there was no confusion as someone was looking at their deck page or a quote. Where does this help? Again, business email compromise leads to losses in multiple places, and all of these different coverages might apply. And that's something that I want to underline, whether it's ransomware, that's cyber extortion, whether it's a funds transfer fraud, which is what we call, what happens when someone pays an invoice to a bad actor, the social engineering. So much of this happens via email. And so protecting that business email system is critical. And this is word for word the definition in the endorsement of multi-factor authentication. Again, these are probably in priority order for security, but all of them qualify. So whether it's hardware or software token, something that you plug into your computer, it is what I use every day, all day, an app on my phone, or text messaging. That screenshot I showed earlier of LinkedIn uses SMS. I'm happy they have multi-factor authentication as a choice. And I'm not going to quibble about which approach they took. We all need to be better, not perfect. And that's really a push here. And I want to underline something. This is not a condition of coverage. There is no premium charge. Coalition is here, before anyone's a customer, after they're a customer, while they're a customer, to evangelize and advocate and advise on multi-factor authentication. This webinar is just one example we have, and I'm going to link to and show you different materials at help.thecoalition.com, where you can learn how to improve, whether it's Office 365, G Suite, or applications like Salesforce. And as I mentioned quickly, this endorsement, the multi-factor authentication retention reduction, is added automatically to all new surplus lines quotes since September 9th, and will be added. We think it's important enough that we're adding it to all our existing policies effective October 1st in the surplus lines market. We feel that strongly about it. We've added other coverage in innovations, and we will continue to do so. This step of saying, look, it's important enough to give to everyone is not always the case, but we're excited to do that for the MFA one. All right, take a breath, and then going to get into how do you do it. I'm repeating this stat. This is not me going backwards, but again, 60% of these email breaches. So if you used email, this is the way in most of the time. And just thought I'd share some aggregate statistics from the webinar attendees. So you and your fellow attendees, no surprise, this mimics what we see across all policyholders, where Office 365 is the most commonly used, Google is a significant minority, and then there's a mix of self-hosted, whether that's Exchange or other services. I'll underline that we don't advise running your own email, but you can do it securely and you can do it with multi-factor authentication. You qualify, and that's great. So I'm going to, give the obvious caveat for the more technical, and first, what we're going to walk through is not terribly technical, but it is something you want to make sure that you're doing with the full awareness of your colleagues. The question of, when you put this requirement in place, then we want to, you want everyone to be aware, because you're changing their workflow. If your colleagues are on the road and are asked to enable two-factor authentication, you don't want to be a surprise. And it could be a surprise because it's quite easy. So I'm going to use the example because that was most commonly cited by all of you of Office 365. So as an admin, it is just a handful of steps. And I'm going to show you in 2 screens what those steps look like. So the admin on Office 365, whether you or your colleague, or perhaps it's an outside IT provider, a managed service provider, logs in, looks at the users, goes to active users, and then under that, innocuous more icon, drop-down menu is multi-factor authentication. From there, and I apologize, the screenshot is a little blurry. My colleague, who has a PhD in cybersecurity, actually helped me with these. But you choose who you want to enable. And this actually might be a rollout strategy, is to enable it for yourself and not force everyone all at once, so that you can go through the experience. But enable one or more, and then you'll be prompted, do you want to enable multi-factor? Confirm and say yes, and it's in place. And then what happens, and I'll show you that next, will be what the user experience is like for your colleagues. I'm going to stop just a moment and look at the question. My apologies, as I'm on one screen, and I'm going to get to the questions in just a moment. What I want to show you is, and I'm happy to go back if the question was about whether the endorsement or anything else. But just as a user, once the admin has set it up and said, yes, enable to multi-factor, then at login, the user, in this case it's me, would be asked to go in and set up this additional security verification. And you can see the labeling. While I throw out MFA, here it's called security verification. And it's a simple process where you're going to say, how should we do it? Mobile app is the preferred choice. And then they'll need to have, and there's a link here to have the app set up, receive the notifications, click setup, and then they're going to be shown a QR code on the screen. And any app, whether it is the Microsoft one or the Google Authenticator, they actually work cross-platform and cross-system. You demonstrate that you have ownership of that phone number and that phone one time with the QR code. And from that point forward, you have an application running which will update the codes every 30 seconds. Whether you're online or not, it doesn't require being connected, which is another advantage over SMS if you happen to be in a place where you don't have coverage. Then you enter that code after you have entered your credentials. So I took the instructions you just saw from one of our articles about Office 365. If you search Office 365 at help.thecoalition, you will find that article and others about turning on audit trails and topics for another time, but certainly we encourage all of those. And then one other plug for our public knowledge base, because again, we want this information available not just to policyholders and brokers, but to all, is that you can turn on multi-factor authentication for other services, whether it's a content management system, publishing a website like WordPress, Salesforce, or many others. Now I will stop for questions, and hang on just one moment. Got it. So there's 3 things I want to say. Can you share these returning now that I've seen the questions? This is being recorded and we are happy to share a recording. Also, we are going to do this webinar again at the same time next week on Wednesday, the 25th of September. And happy to have you spread that invite for others who want to hear it live. But the recording will be available. We'll make it available to all attendees, and then over time to those who are unable to make these times. Trying to accommodate, but understand that we live in an asynchronous world. And the other piece is the slides that I've prepared will also be made available to attendees. Don't know if there are other questions at this time. I'm happy we have more time allowed. I certainly have covered all the topics that were important here. And you can certainly always reach our entire team, live chat, email, and we're also happy to call. Help at Coalition Inc. or help at thecoalition.com. Both work for us. And I'm going to double check for other questions. Got it. So when you may see this, I'm not sure. When is an email going to be challenged with the MFA? Log in to the email client is the question. And the answer is yes. So it log in to the email client. The same way today that someone would be challenged for their username or email and password. The next step would be being asked to enter the code, and whether that comes from the app or SMS or otherwise. It is slightly different in different clients. So in Outlook versus a web browser versus on your phone. But in all cases, multi-factor authentication is something that is supported in all modern email clients and modern email services. Whether you're running it yourself, as long as you're running a up-to-date version of, say, Exchange, again, or more commonly for all of us, a cloud provider such as Microsoft or Google or others. All right, I don't see any further questions at this time. We're always happy to follow up. Again, thank you. This is John Roberts, and I've got Jen McPhillips and Jonathan Thomas from our team. You've probably worked with many of us, and there's lots more of us here to help, whether with you or your customers, because we want to see multi-factor in place everywhere. Thanks very much.